So I made a few test changes since I'm in the mood to fiddle around with things. I put in 2 cards that I've used before, Serra Ascendant and Dark Confidant. You know, I don't like that they don't work with the Abyss and Humility, but they're insanely overpowered for the mana cost. They're so cheap and have such a drastic impact on the game. I don't like the fact that they can be bribery. I don't like the fact they give my opponents targets for their removal spells. And like I said, I don't like the lack of combo with, you know, like the Abyss and Humility, although Confident will at least get himself a replacement card if you have the Abyss out. But I mean, even with all those things in mind, they're just so insanely powerful. If you get them in your opening hand, quite frequently you can just win the game with them. In fact, if you get a mid-game, you can win a game with them. So I decided to try them out, and I don't know if they'll stick around or not, but what I did to put them in was I took out Memory Lapse and I took out Sculpting Steel. So that said, I'm going to go ahead and carry on and show you one of the most epic games I've ever played, and we just have to hope that it doesn't bug out. I have no idea if it's going to or not. So I'm playing Oloro and I'm facing Thassa, and I decided to keep this hand because I can play first turn Orb, and that should be good against a blue deck. And then I have Verdict if he's playing some funky like wizard-based Thassa, which would make sense since it would turn on Thassa. I can just sweep them all away with Verdict. Definitely liking having Verdict in these days. So we'll see what happens. So go ahead and play the first turn Orb strategy. It's just kind of an assumption. He didn't play turn 1 Soul Ring, so you know. But he has a Cold Steel Heart, and I thought, well, that's a bit of a bummer. But I do have Workshop, so all I have to do is draw any artifact mana. I can rock and roll. So we'll see what happens here. And it did slow him down. So I go ahead and get sack lands or tap lands because you know I can take advantage of the fact that I don't have to pay life to untap them right now. And then I scroll rack, and I figure I'm going to scroll rack for 5. I've got 1 floating. I've got tons of artifact mana in this deck, and this should find me the artifact mana to go with the Orb. So I just ship everything away. And there's no artifact mana in the top 10 cards. Can hardly believe it. So now I'm in a bit of a pickle, and then he plays back to basics. So what a huge kick in the nads for me. But on the other side of things, at least Winter Orb is almost back to basics for him. You know, for his lands as well. But he's got a huge advantage, obviously. So the key here for me is I'm gonna have to keep any lands I use, I can't replace, so I'm going to have to keep hitting land drops as much as possible and only cast when I absolutely have to. But because he makes a play here of Worn Power Stone, I decide that I'm going to destroy 2 of my lands to dig. I know that underneath the next card are 2 lands to replace the lands that I'm killing, and I'm going to hit a land drop. That'll allow me to hit a land drop for the next 3 turns. So I go ahead and just set him back and then take my land and play it. And then take my next land and play it, and I go ahead and scroll rack for 5 again. Where is my artifact mana? Almost nowhere to be found. So luckily, though, I've got a sack land, and I can go get a basic land with it. So he plays Worn Power Stone, and I also found another basic land. So I can work around back to basics a bit. So I go ahead and just cast Sensei's Divining Top, since my planes will untap. It gives me a land that I can actually untap next turn. And I wanted my next card, which is Fact or Fiction. And then I go ahead and just play my Flooded Strand and say go. So hopefully nothing happens here. I could have tried to cast Worn Power Stone, but I was a little bit concerned that he might have a counter, or that I might need a counter, because it looks like this is a good time for him to cast his commander, and I really don't want that to. I really don't want his commander in play, like combined with Sensei's Divining Top, giving him a very nice, like, consistent, you know, he's got 7 cards in hand, so he'll just hit mana and spells whenever he wants them. That's too good. So he plays Darksteel Ingot, and kind of regretting the fact that I allowed that back to basics to hit. But because I'm afraid of his commander, I go ahead and use scroll rack to set the cards up this way so that I can grab myself a Worn Power Stone, and then I'm just going to shuffle away the Abyss. And I say go. And then he goes for Bribery, which I have to allow to resolve. I can't afford to counter that. I can answer whatever he bribes with the scroll rack play here, although he might get Trinket Mage or a copy effect and then just get some artifact mana. At this point he's got so much, though, I'm not sure that it's a big deal. But of course he makes the right play. He gets Dark Confidant. That's definitely the card to get there. and then he plays his commander. So now I have to tap some lands. I hate to do it, but I have to tap this way, and I go for the hinder, and it hits. And then I'm going to have to either do this during upkeep or end of turn. I might as well just do it end of turn. I go ahead and scroll rack. I scroll rack everything away, hoping to hit more mana, and of course set the Terminus up so that I can get my Dark Confidant back into my deck, and he doesn't start drawing 2 cards per turn with the top out, which would be bad. So having those creatures in there, starting to hurt a little, although I suppose he could have got, you know, Trinket Mage, like I said, or Metamorph. He would have gotten Trinket Mage over Soul Ring, so I don't know. On the other hand, if I do happen to draw an Ascendant right here, that's probably a pretty good thing for me. We'll see. So he plays Steel Artifact on Scroll Rack. That sucks quite a bit, but at least it's not on the Mox Diamond that I'm hoping to use. And we know that the next 3 cards are not helpful to me, though, so this is a particularly painful situation. So, I mean, he's got, like, so much of an advantage here that you'd think that there's no way that I can win here, but, you know, we'll just keep playing it out. So he plays Solemn Simulacrum, gets a tapped land, that's fine, I've got a Winter Orb, right? So now I know that I've looked at 2 cards, and I know the next card is no good for me, but underneath that there might be a land, and so I go ahead and top. Besides, what am I going to do? I have to tap 1 land per turn and use it, ideally, because I can only untap 1 land per turn. So I top and find... I don't remember what I found. I didn't mean to minimize the revealed cards, but I'm pretty sure that the top card is a Wasteland now. So I don't tip my hand and activate the top and get the Wasteland. I figure he doesn't need to know that the next card's a Wasteland. I've got to untap this anyway before I can cast my Warm Power Stone. So then he goes and plays Soul Ring for some crazy reason using his Tectonic Edge, which will not untap. Thanks. I'm cool with that. Attacks me for 2, but Oloro doesn't care about it being attacked for 2. So there's the Wasteland, and that gets me a Mox, which resolves, which is huge. And he's got only 2 cards left, so I go for Warm Power Stone. And he's got this Dissipate. But the nice thing here is that, again, misplaying horribly, he doesn't use his Soul Ring to pay for the Dissipate, so he puts even more lands underneath the pressure of Winter Orb. So that works for me. Wait, let's see. Are my revealed cards gonna... Oh, that's exiled. Okay. So we're glitching on the names, but at least not on the game. So he's finally able to put a little bit of damage on me, but he's got like a long way to go. Two per turn is what he's hitting me for now. So, you know, it's gonna take him 30 turns to kill me basically. And then he plays Energy Flux, and like what kind of blue deck runs? Okay, back to basics. I'm with you. You play back to basics, then that means you need to play. That's fine in a mono blue deck, but what kind of blue deck runs tons of artifact ramp and Energy Flux? This is just pointless hosing. So I am actually disappointed to see it in some way, because I was slowly working around the Winter Orb back to basics issue. But on the other hand, and I'm sad to see that Winter Orb is probably going to go, but on the other hand, I can use this against him. So he's down to 1 card in hand, and oh yeah, that was the other card that I put back with land tags. Was land tags. So now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I need him to play a land, but he's unlikely to do so with the Scroll Rack in play. So this Flux is going to likely encourage him to get rid of the Scroll Rack and help me out even further. So with that in mind, I need to not give him enough mana to pay for all of his artifacts here. So I go ahead and just skip out on playing land tax. Plus, I don't really want to telegraph it and have him hold lands. And I pay for the Winter Orb. So this way, he's encouraged to play a land next turn. I just draw my top and say go. He activates his top, and then he's got all kinds of upkeep costs to pay. So Solemn puts the top back in his hand that he just put down. Scroll Rack, I thought he was going to pay for it here, and I was getting really sad, and then nope, he lets Scroll Rack go. That's outstanding. He pays for Soul Ring and Warm Power Stone, but they're effectively dead since they're just paying for themselves over and over. Now he's down to Cold Steel Heart and the Ingot. So since Energy Flux is a sacrifice, Indestructible doesn't help him. He can actually lose his Ingot. He decides to use lands to pay for one, and decides to go ahead and pay for the other as well. So I basically time walked him with that play and destroyed his scroll rack, which is pretty fantastic. But he doesn't play a land for me. However, given that he's tapped out and he is playing some counter spells I've seen dissipate, I can't afford to have him counter land tax. I need to get it into play, so I go ahead and slam it into play now. And basically, he doesn't get to play lands for the rest of the game, and I can live with that. Plus, I've got Fabricate. That was the last card, and so I have a way to work around it. If I can get a third land, I could cast Fabricate and go get County Gem, and then ultimately try to get a County Gem into play, and I could start land taxing. And once I start getting basic lands with back to basics out there, it's not a big deal anymore. So he's working top as best he can, and decides that he's going to commandeer my Sensei's Divining Top, dropping down 2 more cards, throwing away Maishin the Mind Cage and Control Magic, so he can have a Divining Top. But I'm not sure that Divining Top's particularly good when you have Energy Flux in play. Is he going to activate it and give it back to me, or just let it die? I don't know, but I was really happy to see a freaking top. Basically, I traded a top for a Force of Will, for worse than a Force of Will, really. So he's still like paying for his own stuff over there, and he finally lets, what does he let go? Yeah, he lets my top die. So yeah, I traded a top for a Commandeer plus two other cards. It's pretty cool. And he's busy paying 2 mana for his 1 mana producing ingot. So he's like completely screwed himself with the Energy Flux, which I love. And not only that, but he has to cast the top, and then he has to get rid of it, or spend 2 every turn and then 1 to use it. So this top is sucking up a bunch of mana as well from him due to the flux. So I draw and play a land and just say go. I'm not going to fabricate here. I'm not ready to do that yet. I thought about fabricating for Crypt, but I didn't want to. I was hoping to not. So the bad thing here is I played an extra land, which means he can play an extra land, and he does. But no big deal in that sense, just because we're still even. And look at that top deck, how sexy. Strip Mine. Now I made a small misplay here. I'll show you what it is. But yeah. So in a moment. So at the end of his turn, so he just looks, can't find anything useful. Plays another land. He's got 4, 8, 9, 10, 11 lands, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 lands. So I make a misplay here slightly. I didn't think it through entirely. I strip mine my own land, so I'll have 1 less, and then I can tax. But what I should have done was strip mine one of my tap lands, so I'd have 2 less, then I can tax, play a land, and tax again. I just didn't think it through entirely. So, okay, no big deal. Strip Mine strips itself and fails. Because I actually had 4 basic lands in there, and I was only able to get 3 this turn, and I wasn't going to get to tax again, so yeah, that was an error on my part for sure. So I go ahead and fabricate, and I get myself Metamorph, and then throw away this Verdant Catacombs, which is unlikely to be particularly useful with given the fact that there are only non-basics left other than my 1 island, and it can't fetch that. So from there, I go ahead and, having drawn Lotus, I thought about playing the Lotus and then Metamorph the Lotus, but I figured, you know, he probably has another counter in his hand, and I want to draw it out, and the Lotus is actually more important than Ves. And if he doesn't have a counter, then I can start using Ves. So I go for it, and it resolves. Wouldn't you have liked to have commandeered that? Well, who knows. So he makes another misplay. I Ves and tutor instead of tapping his hand. And he doesn't swing, probably because he was getting a little frustrated with how useless his Trinket Mage's 2 damage was in the face of Oloro's life gain. But he misses the fact that he needs to attack Vest, so I get 2 counters on Vest for free, basically, from that. I draw Force of Will, the thing that I went and tutored for. So now, with 5 mana, I'm able to cast... And I figured Vest would only have 1 counter here, and I wasn't going to get to tutor, and I was going to hit his hand. But hey, even better. So I go ahead and just copy his Trinket Mage. Go get myself a Ever-Flowing Chalice. The thought being that if I can get more than 2 counters on the Chalice, it'll generate mana under the Flux. So I go get Chalice here, and then since he didn't take a counter off this, I fetch. So the first card I got was Force of Will, and the next card I get, we'll see. but I've got Trinket Mage guarding the Vess. So now upkeep Lotus is gonna produce mana for me, so I go ahead and pay for it that way. I pay for Lotus and I pay for the Trinket Mage. And here's the card I went and got, Mind Twist. So Vess helps me out. Take one card out of his hand and then twist for 3. Force of Will backup. He tops and activates it in response, I guess, trying to protect something. I don't know what he was trying to protect, but Temple of the False Guards, Treachery, and Lightning Reeves don't seem particularly good to me. Neither does Sundial of the Infinite, which I got on the last turn. So it was funny because if you scroll up, like at some point here, he says he had all lands, but when you actually look at his supposed all lands, since I've dumped his hand, it's been crappy spell, useless spell, one land. That's it. So hardly the all lands that he was complaining about. So he does get one land there, however. I go ahead and again pay for the Lotus and the Trinket Mage to protect Vess. Draw and then hit a card out of his hand, copy artifact. So yeah, his supposed all lands was 1 out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Not sure why he didn't. I mean, he had copy artifact, he had one card in hand. Why would you not copy artifact, Gilded Lotus there? I have no idea. But yeah. Little misplays like tapping his own Tectonic Edge under Back to Basics when he didn't have to, using too many islands when he didn't have to, he had the Soul Ring. See, look at this, 1 land and 4 spells, not what I'd call all land. But yeah. So finally, since he's got no cards in hand and he's playing a top, I go ahead and Factor Fiction, thinking I may just Force of Will the top if I can get like a glut of blue spells here. But I Factor Fiction into this, and he separates out Cryptic in one pile and 4 cards in the other. I'm taking the 4 pile, and I decide this. I'll crumple or counter it later. I'm going to save Force of Will. I've got Mystical Teachings to get a couple of counter spells, so I'll just go ahead and let that thing. He can have it for now. So that's fine. So upkeep again. I go ahead and pay. This time I pay for just the Lotus and I let the Trinket Mage die. I don't need him anymore to protect Vess since she has 3 counters, and in a few turns I'm anticipating having a big blocker named Oloro in the way. So for this turn I play Crypt, tap for 8 mana, and cast myself an Everflowing Chalice with 4 counters. So that's going to be able to pay for itself plus the Lotus. And then I go ahead and cast Kalni Gem, who can pay for himself. And I actually thought about maybe holding off on the Chalice play and getting the Gem down so I could use Shop to make an even bigger Chalice. But I felt like that was just, that would have taken too long, like it would have been too slow. So by making this play here, I've still got 2 mana up for a mana drain, and of course I have my Force of Will. And so I go ahead and just play Scrubland as my land for the turn, and then I just discard and throw away Workshop. I don't need a Shop at this point anymore. It would have been nice for that possible Chalice play, but that's about it. So now I can actually crumple as well as Force of Will, or mana drain and Force of Will, either depending on which the situation might call for. He should attack Vess and take it down to 2 counters. Not that that's particularly helpful. So he doesn't activate top. He's leaving top in play and paying for it now. Just Flux is hurting him still a little bit more. He uses Worn Power Stone to pay for the thing because Power Stone was just paying for itself anyway. So he has now fluxed away his own Power Stone. You can add that to the list of his own cards that he's killed with that thing. So he does attack Vess. He at least didn't misplay that turn. And then uses top, which is great because now I know that I'm definitely going to counter it now that I don't have to use a Force of Will to counter it, unless he forces me to. And for whatever reason he plays a land here and doesn't cast a spell. So I thought he'd be activating it so he could get 2 cards into play, but no, he's apparently activating it so that I can start land taxing again. So I do. Thank you for the last basic island to work around your Back to Basics. And I go ahead and tap 4 and pay for itself. Lotus, I tap the Crypt and pay for the Kalni Gem, and then I let the Crypt die because why leave a Crypt into play? Now I've got plenty of mana, so I Vess away the card in his hand, and thinking about playing Oloro here, and decide that I'm going to go ahead and get it down. What's he going to do? He'd need 2 control magics, and I've got 2 counter spells, so there's no way he's going to kill Oloro, and that will protect Vess, and Vess will, if he doesn't draw actual. So if he doesn't draw an actual, we know his next card is top, and I'm going to counter that. So I basically got a time walk out of it. And then after that, going forward, whenever he draws a counter spell, if it's just one card in his hand, I'm going to vest it before I cast anything. So now he's in the disrupting scepter lock, or just scepter lock, for those of you who remember this from the Weissman school of how to beat your opponent. So because I know that it's impossible for him to cast anything else this turn, and I'm no longer going to need Force of Will's alternate cost, not with this much mana and this many counters, I go ahead and just spend full cast the Force now, and I'm good with how that works out. So now from here it's pretty much elementary. I pay for Oloro's card drawing ability, keep my artifact mana into play, find myself a disenchant. That's great. Now I can kill back to basics or energy flux. I'm no longer even interested in killing back to basics. I mean, ultimately I will, but I don't care right now. It's not hurting me much at all. So I leave flux in place so that on the off chance he'll just let his soul ring die. He doesn't. So then after he pays the upkeep on it, I immediately kill back to basics, thinking, you know what, I can pay for the flux costs easily with, basically killing back to basics adds 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 mana, 7 mana to my board state. If I kill flux, I get 2, 4, 6, 8 mana, so that this is actually like a slightly worse play, but I like the fact that flux is hurting his mana too. This is hurting one of his, and this is hurting two of his. So if you look at it, +7 for me, -1 for him is 6. +8 for me, -2 for him is 6. So either one was fine. So I go ahead and just kill back to basics. And he plays Overburden because he has to, which does, whenever a player plays a non-token, you return a land. That actually would have helped me out. I could have been picking up these lands and resetting them. Makes no sense in there. But whatever. He has to play whatever he's got, since I've got Bess, and I go ahead and just Mystical Teachings for Mystical Tutor for Yawgmoth's Will. So now I've got tons of mana. And see, the other thing I was thinking, I ended up rejecting the plan, but I was thinking I would let Chalice go, and then I could will, and then will a bigger Chalice into play. But, I decided that's just a little bit too, like, unnecessary for me. So I go ahead and just pay the upkeep for everything, draw, and pop the will off. So Crypt comes down, Workshop comes out, Mox Diamond comes down. I disenchant his energy flux. I'm done dealing with that. I go ahead and copy a Lotus, play a top, use Vest to search for what I want, activate the top, and what I wanted was Rift, so I rift everything back to his hand, and then Mind Twist for 3, and I have destroyed everything he has except for lands. And I have a counterspell ready to go, and just like that, a little bit of effort. I've got 2 mana left, so I go ahead and spend one of them to Mystical Tutor yet again, and he casts Sky Diamond. Sky Diamond and Energy Flux makes perfect sense together, right? Anyway, so I draw the card that I Mystical Tutored for bid, hoping that I would just get him to concede instead of having to beat him down, and hey, find myself a Serra Ascendant. So I figure Serra Ascendant will go very nicely with a Well of Lost Dreams, so I'm going to put that into play, and a Staff of Nin, and I say go. And on turn 29, having fought through having almost no mana whatsoever due to our very early control, double like hoser play, I get control of this game, and in the end, my opponent has basically nothing, and the Oloro deck wins. And that is probably the longest video I've ever made, which hasn't glitched, and has been a one-on-one game. So I hope that you enjoyed watching that game as much as I enjoyed playing it. That was incredibly fun, and it just shows you that you should never give up when it comes to the Oloro deck. You just have to fight to always fight to figure out how you can win. What you have to do, what has to happen to win. Try to keep those things in mind. Don't focus on the fact that you're losing. Just focus on the things that you need to happen for a victory to reveal itself, and then play accordingly, and you can climb out of any situation with this deck, pretty much. So that's it. Thanks for watching. Here's another peek at the deck list as it is now. We'll see if Serra Ascendant and Dark Confidence stay. But I have a feeling that they're just too grossly overpowered not to use. There are also some interesting things you can do if you're facing if you have your own Abyss and you happen to have Metamorph. Like, you can clone your Confident or your Ascendant, and then the Abyss will not eat your Metamorph because it remains an artifact, which you can then copy again if you want. Yeah, there's funky little things like that, but I don't know. We'll see. Having an extra counterspell and having an extra copy artifact effect is pretty powerful too. So I hope you enjoyed the games. That's it. We'll see you next time.